Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanara Bhartanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum. We salute Krishna, son of Vasudeva, destroyer of the demons, Kamsa and Chanura, supreme delight of Devaki, Lord God himself and the Guru of the entire universe. So, last week we commenced an introduction to the study of chapter 7, but at this point it's useful to review where we've been and where we're about to go. Where we're about to go is, first 6 chapters were to do, broadly speaking, with how to act and react with a sense of equipoise and development of closeness to the oneness that we call Atman in our normal everyday life, in the normal situation that we find ourselves, whether it's the workplace or, in Arjun's case, whether it's the military field. And so the next 6 chapters, with the emphasis particularly on the 8th, 9th, leading up to the 12th, we find a chapter on devotion. Devotion, non-demanding love of God. This particular variety is a unique introduction from Sri Krishna, because as far as we know, up to that point, we only have a loose understanding of this devotional aspect. All the Upanishads are orientated toward the impersonal, mostly. But here we find a scope for people of a different kind of temperament. In this modern age, there is a great need for love. And if we can take this love and make it universal, then the whole universe will be a much better place. So, in reviewing the story so far, we can say, we start off with a general human condition of suffering. And Arjuna's suffering is very acute. And all of us have suffered, or are in the process of suffering. Sometimes we may not acknowledge the suffering because things seem to be going well. When we try to define happiness, it's really more on the basis of that we have no particular disturbance. Because we have no arthritis, we say we are happy. But as soon as arthritis comes, then we become unhappy. As soon as there's a problem that besets us, it disturbs our equilibrium. And so what we call happiness is just the absence of sorrow for the time being. It's not a very good condition. But Arjuna is lucky, is fortunate, because he resorts to a teacher, not just any teacher. He's the best teacher in the world. Some entity that is classified as avatara, a special incarnation that has no baggage to bring forward, that comes forth into the world specifically as a shining light to uplift the whole of humanity for the duration of time. And at a moment which is appropriate in the environment of this arrival, where there was a need for dispelling any confusion and for leading humanity forward. And this message of the Bhagavad Gita is useful and valid for us today. And so he seeks an instant remedy and is given an instant remedy which goes to the very heart of the matter. It goes to the very core of our being that relieves the suffering. Consciousness that is normally our birthright flows through the sense organs to the outside as if through windows. And so our view is primarily orientated toward the external world. But of course it's the external world of objects that gives us this painful experience. Supposing there was a systematic formula that could stay this flow and keep it poised internally. This sense of poise and this essential entity that is our own being is called Atman, the immortal self. It doesn't change, it doesn't die, it is not affected in any way, it doesn't act, it doesn't react. And so therefore when we come to that position of poise, we find the sorrow disappears. It's an area of creativity also that we can use from that point of view and beam everywhere as well. And so, when consciousness, which is our birthright, is stayed from flowing out through the senses, then a few wise people find this introspective technique of discovering this central poised position that we call the divine self. And so this practice ultimately culminates in the last chapter in which we studied, which is the 6th chapter. And the 6th chapter culminates in this intensive introspective aspect, this intensive concentration, where there's only stillness, and where we find this mystic union. I was reading a book from a Christian point of view, telling us that this mystic union is the very height of Christian experience. It's something that we find very different from the theological dogmatic position of any religion, including Christianity, that starts from you are a sinner and you need to make reparation for your sins and make good, and only salvation can only occur through the salvific value of the blood of a Savior. Instead, it shifts its perspective and says, quoting biblically as well as from St. Paul, that the whole goal is this unity with Christ. And the author mentions, who happens to be a priest, a Christian priest, mentions that he was in Scotland. And I had a chuckle because when I was in Scotland only a few weeks ago, I was in Edinburgh, and we were walking through the streets, and there was a man, a dour Scotsman, approaching me with obvious displeasure, looking at this orange outfit I had. And as he passed, he audibly and adamantly said, "Jesus is Lord." Of course he said in a Scottish accent, "Okay, Jesus is Lord," and passed. And his point, I suppose, was, that you're obviously a heathen and don't believe in that. Had I had the opportunity, of course he passed very quickly, I would have said, yes, of course he's Lord, I accept that, no problem. So we're both on the same page. But this author was telling how a certain person of a Christian persuasion asked him, have you discovered Jesus as your Lord and Savior? See, you accept this Lord? And his reply was, no, I don't wish to have that. I wish to have a relationship with everybody else. I think it was couched in this language, do you have a relationship with Jesus? No, I don't want a relationship with Jesus. I want union with Jesus. Can you see the difference? And the person, of course, gave up, because obviously conversion was no longer on horizon when you give an answer like that. Seemingly incomprehensible answer, because of a certain mindset that says that we are in a deficit position and we need raising up, we need saving. And if that doesn't happen, then we're forever in the mud. And this is not our position. So Sri Krishna points out that there's an inner glory which is always there and continues to be there. And all we have to do is discover this, and our grief will dissolve. And this is the whole purport of the Upanishads, this emphasis on this poised divinity. And then we find that there is a discovery, really, in the beauty of this inner essence. And then this discovery leads us to a position of appreciation, of wonder, of adoration, and ultimately of love. When we understand the whole purport of the statement that we find in the Kathopanishad, Tamevam bantamnu bhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vivati. See, tasya bhasa sarvamidam vivati. See, he's shining, all the things shine, and all this shines by that central light. When we see a person's eyes shining, it's because there's an entity. He's shining, all things shine. He's shining, the sun shines. He's shining, we find life and light and love everywhere. And so in commencing this series of chapters from number 7 onwards, the next 6 chapters of this Bhagavad Gita, to cater for the capacity to take all our emotion and steer it in a particular way, and understand this truth of tameva, bantamanu bhati sarvam, that He's shining, all things shine. We find a reason why there should be non-demanding love. Because when we find any chapter on love of God and find this statement, God is love, and we should love God. In fact, not only should we love God, but we should love God to the point of intrinsic involvement and a point of unity, which should not be strange in human loving terms. After all, in human relationships, there comes a point where this nearness, this closeness becomes a oneness, a unity. When people get married, they take these vows, assuming that these two separate people will ultimately, in fact, be and operate as one thing. That's the whole idea of the sanctity of marriage in every single culture that you can think of. So there's a naturalness about it, that a relationship develops not as individuals having a relationship one with another, but a kind of unity of existence, that we become a part and parcel of that entity. A kind of position of Vishishtadvaita that says we are spark, or somehow a part and parcel, somehow so intimately connected that we feel a certain oneness, that we are able to operate from the divine point of view. Not just walk with the divine, but become intrinsically one with that entity. And so the subject of non-demanding love automatically raises that question, why and how should we love God? And then it's clear that when we learn more about that entity, by understanding the glory we find everywhere, the more that is revealed to us, the more we can easily feel that that entity is lovable. And so classically 6 attributes are given. It's called Bhagavatim. That is, Aishwarya is power, and everything else stems from it. You see, we find that Christian prayer at the end of the Our Father, the power and the glory is mentioned there. So it's intrinsically something that is powerful. We encapsulate it in the word omnipotent, that there's an omnipotence, there's also an omniscience, and there's also an omnipresence. So this is seen in these 6 ways, 6 attributes. To name them, Aishwarya is the great power, the omnipotent, characterized by strength, the embodiment of strength, because when we understand it, we ourselves become strong. What is stronger than the thing that never changes? Look how strong a mountain looks. It doesn't shift. Look how strong an elephant looks. It just brushes away tree trunks as if they're twigs. Jnana, knowledge. See this understanding of being omniscient. That is wise. The embodiment of knowledge and wisdom. And then yasha, splendor, glory, a sense of omnipresence and fullness. And then we find vairagya, dispassion. That is something that is unattached, something that is always free. We are always attached, always bound. We're not free. We're looking for this power, we're looking for this wisdom, and we're looking for this freedom. And then, of course, dharma. Dharma implies righteousness, harmony, but its root tells us the thing that knits things together and keeps them fixed in a sense of balance and harmony. A network that keeps things in a secure position. Something that is harmonious. One thing we know about the universe is it has its balancing power. There's a principle which we know can be violated in certain contexts. That principle is conservation of energy and matter. It's not always the case. As soon as we discover that space itself is expanding, we then have to ask what becomes of for photons. Well, the answer is we don't know. They just seem to disappear. They don't seem to be conserved. So there are instances where these laws are violated. But nevertheless, we see that generally there is this balance. When we find one thing springing up, let's say an electron, a positron, an opposite thing has to arise as well. And the two cancel each out. Unless, for some reason, one is sustained, and then it sits in a juxtaposition with some other positive element that makes sure that things get sustained. So when one thing goes down, we know and are confident that the universe brings it back again. And it is the Lord of the universe himself who does it. And from age to age, we are told, does it. Whenever there's a need. Yada yada hi dharmasya, the passage begins like that. From age to age, this cosmic balancing power comes and restores things. And Krishna is the embodiment of such a thing. And so then we have Shri, the embodiment of abundance and beauty, goodness, love, harmony, all of these things. And so even by repeating these affirmations, which are now familiar to you, strong, true, wise, full, free, pure, beauty, goodness, love, elucidating these 6 qualities of a personal God, they invoke this quality within us. By using these affirmations, we find that they have an inner absorptive mechanism which vibrates in us and has a transforming capacity psychologically and also physically, whereby we adopt these qualities and we then can radiate them to others, a kind of generating a kind of magnetic field around us that has a transformational effect. Why don't we use it to make the world a better place? Well, once we understand the process of it and the mechanism of it, we surely can do it and transform our own reality. So, we begin then with an answer to this question because, just to remind you, the last stanza of the 6th chapter tells us that of all the yogis, he who worships me with great faith, his inmost self merged in me, him I hold to be the most devout. So that is stated up front. And so an elucidation has to take place on what that is and what that looks like. What is this Lord? How can we love something unless we can describe it in all its aspects, in its grand totality? That is why the whole theme starts off with a characterization of what is this nature. Now, the word nature in Sanskrit is prakriti. And prakriti embraces a whole totality. Since we cannot describe this totality in a single word or a single concept, God can be all or any of these attributes. It can be personal. It can be formed as you wish. There is no limit, really, to the glory of this entity that we call a God. We can't describe it. It's beyond our description, beyond our words, beyond our concepts. And therefore, it is this fullness which is not encapsulated within any system. And this is the beauty of the Vedanta, because Vedanta is so broad, it says, we are not done with it yet. Revelation is continuing. Like trying to describe the contents of an ocean by looking at a single aspect of it, a small eddy, a small current, a small wave, a small engagement in a whirlpool somewhere. You know, you must have seen, if you travel by aircraft going across the sea, you can look down on a clear day. The clouds are all gone, and you'll see very clearly the beautiful waves swelling and going up and down and breaking into a froth and then disappearing. It's a beautiful thing to see, because immediately what should come to mind, or could come to mind in the light of modern science, is the whole universe is like that. And the great rishis would have understood that, and understood that actually this universe can be compared to water. It's described as a watery thing, something that is water. It's not that it's literally water, but it's like that. It has no boundaries, and it operates and comes up as waves. And the whole thing of these waves, these subtle waves that we don't see, behind everything, moving everything forward and expressing and manifesting, is really one ocean. That has to be understood. When we understand this oneness and this grand totality that we can never fathom the depths of, then we'll be much more generous in understanding not just a toleration of religions, but an appreciation of an acceptance of all of it, knowing that not one religion can claim exclusivity. We see immediately the flaw, because one religion would be one small point of view. Any description of this totality will only be looking at the crest of a crest of a crest of a wave, and that's it. And we only have a limited way of viewing it. So that's explored from the first stanza of this great chapter, which is called Jnanavan Jana Yoga. That requires some explanation. Jnana, knowledge. Vijnana, understanding. And there's a great difference between the two. To the human mind, the Lord's power appears as what we call nature, but this world, Prakriti, incorporates a lower nature and a higher nature. It bifurcates it in this way. And so there's no controversy about supernatural. You'll find that in the Western system, because this totality of concept is not there really, there's an immediately a divergence of opinion which says we are naturalists. We believe in the natural order of things. And for that reason we only believe in materialism, reductionist materialism. We cannot believe in the supernatural since we cannot see what's beyond those boundaries. It's not even speculating. This is the agnostic, atheistic position which has a materialism within it. But there's no mention of this in this system, since it says that we acknowledge something which is both higher and lower, and it is all vidya, it is all knowledge, but classified as paravidya and aparavidya, lower knowledge and higher knowledge. In answer to that question, kasmin no bhavo vidyate, what is that? By knowing which we can know everything. An attempt to get at this vast depth, this ocean, knowing which we can know every wave. So that's the idea about it. It's a common contemporary view that is promoted by certain neo-atheists today, such as, Richard Dawkins and so on and so forth, bless his heart, that says that nature is self-sufficient. See, we don't need any other explanation. It doesn't require a primary cause. But this is not a new argument. This is an old argument. But doesn't necessarily relegate the essence away from it, the ultimate causal aspect of it. For example, the Sankhya philosophy, and we are studying that a little bit on Sunday mornings when we discuss and investigate the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. It's clear that we have to point out the Sankhya system and Yoga system are dualistic systems. And certainly in the Sankhya system, there's no room for God. We don't explore it. There are two things, dualistic system. There is nature, this Prakriti, and there is this other thing, Purusha. Here really classified in the Bhagavad Gita as one thing, but with the subtext is there's a higher aspect and a lower aspect. The higher aspect we can call Purusha in Sankhya language. The lower aspect we can call nature as we know it. That is, the thing that has a horizon, the thing that is obviously has some changes, all these waves, and we can conveniently categorize these waves into some 24 different categories. So the Sanskrit term for nature that incorporates the entire range of this material world, and that the Brahma Sutras combat this dualistic idea or this self-caused thing, and points out that from inert, insentient matter, how will you ever get sentient conscience, a sentient conscious entity, some sophisticated thing called man, that is able to investigate these things? How will you explain this? That requires some conscious entity that sits there, in, through, and as and beyond it, expressing itself in an unfolding way. And so, as I say, this Sanskrit term of nature in Prakriti, which is feminine in gender, incorporates the entire range of the material world. And that eludes us, of course. We call this whole thing Prakriti. We put it feminine in gender, and her lower aspect really is what the five senses grasp. So the first thing we need to investigate in the first 7 stanzas is this Prakriti, both low and high, and what is that? And so it begins off with this statement. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Blessed Lord said, Maya sakta manaha partha yogam yunjam vadasrayaha asamsayam samagramam yatha nyanyasya nyanyasitach chirunyu. So, this asakta manaha, with the mind clinging, Arjuna is asked to please listen, because that's how we pick things up. You see, we can read something, but listening from the mouth of a divine entity, there's no substitute for it. Even in listening from a teacher, we've seen how in the Gospel of Ramakrishna, that is elucidated by Swami Purnananda there on Sunday evenings, we find this great formula that Sri Ramakrishna gives. Keeping holy company is one thing, but one aspect of it is that learning from the lips of that holy person. There's no substitute. Reading, we don't get the same thing. Reading, we put it on an intellectual level. And so to bring it into the heart requires a living teacher. This is why a teacher is emphasized and holy company is emphasized. But see how with your mind clinging to me, this is the whole idea. So this clinging to me, that is this reliance on me, this devotional aspect, and practicing yoga, see, taking refuge in me. Now, this is a kind of interpretation of what is there, but taking refuge in me, the term is ashraya. That means being dependent on me, being reliant on me. What does this mean? It means that in all our daily activities there should be an element of faith, that the outcome will come and be supplied freely to us. All we have to do is mindfully and with a sense of devoutness, a sense of offering all our activities and our fruits, or discerning of the fruits, knowing that they don't belong to us. This is this aspect of karma yoga. And so we have brought in this one statement, these 3 aspects of yoga which are there, namely this worshipful aspect, this karma yoga, dissociation from the fruits of our activities, and this assurance that without a doubt, samagram, holy, you will find, practicing this yoga, practicing this sense of attunement, you will without any doubt, absolutely assured, know me. And here's the thing, this particular aspect, samagram, fully, absolutely fully. This is a wonderful statement. We don't have to look any further. We know the whole totality through this chapter. Everything is explained. Whether we understand it or not, but you see an acknowledgement that most people will grasp only a part of it, which means you'll only get a part satisfaction, a part understanding. But this is the whole thing, the vast totality, difficult to understand. And so that's the importance of this chapter. Now, we'll go on to describing what this lower nature is, what this higher nature is, but let's explore what we mean by Jnanavan Jana by way of example. You see, the whole subject says that jnana, knowledge, is not sufficient. Understanding a principle, applying some reasoning as well, is not sufficient. We have to go further. And Sri Ramakrishna gives this wonderful example of wood. There are some people who understand in principle that fire is contained within wood. in some way. And also, if you want to generate this fire, then you have to use some friction. You take this wood and, chemically speaking, you rub these molecules together. You make them bang into each other and generate some heat, and provided the carbon is there and the oxygen is there, something called fire comes. And that fire supplies, as long as fuel is there, as long as oxygen is there, then the fire will be sustained. That's all very good, and you can Google how to do that. But you know, there are these reality shows, I think, isn't it? He's gone exploring. These reality shows where you find the essential thing is, we put you in an area, let's say Africa, Kalahari Desert or something, and you're asked, let's say a survival course. All right, no matches. You have to have a skill at making fire. We'll give you some moss or something, or find it anyway, in the jungle. And then you have to have the skill of generating fire. Typically, you can take a dry piece of wood and make a hollow in it. That's the first thing you do. And then put some dry grass in it. And then take another stick, and then, risking calluses on your hands, you then roll it, until you find a little bit of smoke. And then there's a delicate thing of catching the spark, and then blowing gently on it. In other words, supplying oxygen to it, so that it catches on to the other elements. And when you've got a little bit, then you add to it and make a bigger fire, like that. Be careful that it doesn't go out. Now the experience of doing that will endorse the theory that fire is present potentially in wood. So that's the next stage. This is all then jnana. The first is a kind of general theoretical understanding. The next is knowledge. But finally, using that fire and cooking food on it is vijnana. And that is necessary. We go from a position of understanding, let's say in jnana yoga, a process of neti, elimination of what is reality, what is not reality, and what is permanent versus what is not permanent. Going through that laborious process through discernment, something we all have to do, something that is a key component in the process. And understand another thing, that this friction is necessary. This going against the grain is necessary. This generation of heat is necessary. We call it tapasya. Discipline is necessary. A systematic process is necessary. And through that process, we then come to an understanding, a knowledge. And once through this elimination process we find, aha, I have found that one, we find that we still haven't found the totality, because once we found that, we now discover that that entity has become all of this. It's the same thing. So we were describing earlier how Ramakrishna tells us when you go up stone steps to a roof, we find that the material of the roof and the steps and the walls and everything is the same thing. Same material is being used. It's the same substance that is there. So good teachers, by giving these variations of examples, tell us something. Milk is another example. You can, if you never had milk before, then you can hear about it. Somebody tells you about it. That's one thing. So you hear about it. And then you see it. And then you finally taste it. It's vijnana, which is the tasting aspect of it. And then you get an understanding of the totality of it, that it become all of this. You no longer stop at that level. You now understand that the whole of existence is the same thing. What we find as the one essential unity, this Brahman, we find with eyes open, that we see this everywhere. We see it as a personalized aspect, saguna. This 7th chapter is exploring the personal aspect of this. So he says, I shall teach you in full, without reservation, this knowledge combined with realization, which being known, nothing more here remains to be known. What a wonderful statement. So it goes on. This stanza says, Jnanam te ham savijnanam idam vakshyami asheshatha yajñatva neha bhuyo nyatatyam avashishyate. I shall teach you in full. What? Jnanam, this knowledge combined, necessary to have a combination, not only the principle but the actuality, combined with this vijnana, with this realization. So vijnanam, this combination with realization, which being known, nothing more here remains to be known. So the former thing is paroksha jnanam, and the latter is aparoksha jnanam, and endowed with both of these, the aspirant gets to know this supreme Brahman, this truth in its entirety, not just one aspect, not just the other aspect. Knowing that, what will happen? The heart gets moved. We have every reason now to love because we understand this entity is wondrous, and this entity takes our breath away, and this entity we see behind, in, through, as and beyond everything. That process is there. So there's a caution about this. What is that? The caution is like this, and it's a fact that is stated, that this entity is not easily understood. Is not easily understood. The fact that you are here studying this is a wonderful thing, but don't be blasé about it, because there's a statistic that goes with that. Among thousands of people who engage in this, scarcely one really strives for perfection, takes it up seriously, makes it an in-depth search, so that all your spiritual practice has to intensify. See how many times I say, we have this opportunity, for example, coming up, this retreat. It's necessary to renew your spiritual life from time to time. It's necessary to engage with your guru or your teacher. It's necessary to intensify. It's necessary to find many, many different tools and ways. It's necessary to monitor how your beginning stage in spiritual life needs to be deepened and intensified at every moment. It's this intensification that we call sadhana, spiritual practice. It's not a static thing. And in case we think that it's a routine thing and that we're satisfied with where we are now and with our so-called progress, beware, because the attention can be upset in a given moment. See the story of Vishwamitra, how, I think I told you previously, how he made every effort to gain this aishwarya, this power, but he was orientated toward the physical. You know, if you learn concentration, the power of concentration, you'll gain mastery. You'll gain mastery over the elements. These elements that we have, and this lower aspect of this Prakriti, we understand as an eightfold thing, which we'll discover shortly. And to systematically and helpfully and usefully understand the hierarchy within this nature is a good means to intensify our understanding, to go through this process and to understand this totality that we're speaking of. Among thousands of people, scarcely one strives for perfection. And of those who strive and succeed, scarcely one knows me in truth. Manushashanam sahasreshu kashyat yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kashin mam veti tattvataha. Manushanam, of men, literally, of people, men, a generic term for people, among thousands, sahasreshu, kashyat, someone strives, not many, siddhaya, for perfection. These striving ones, of those who strive, even of those, very few become successful. And so therefore we should strive as much as we possibly can with this great understanding that the Vedantic system says that we have many chances. It's not to be, relaxed about it and fatalistic about it and say, well, it's all right. Actually, I won't actually even bother or strive too much because next life I will have next life and next life. Don't take that for granted. Next life you might be born as a crocodile, who knows. So this life is the only opportunity you have. Strive as best you can. And what that means is constant system of tuning. Remember we talked about these two methods, Abhyasa Yoga, Vairagya. These two things are necessary. This constant tuning in is necessary. Practicing the presence of God is necessary. Understanding the glory that we find in the whole of nature. And the wonderful thing about this chapter and subsequent chapters will be that we give so many examples of God's glory everywhere. We see this grace flowing in every one of these 24 principles. We're only catching the crest of a wave, that's okay. But the senses themselves are comprised of these very, very elements that comprise the whole of the universe as such. So among thousands of men, scarcely one strives for perfection, and of those who strive and succeed, scarcely one knows me, this deep jnana, in truth, that means in totality, as I actually am, and knows me, that is, Krishna, the embodiment of this personal God, as one aspect. And when we know that, we understand that entity in depth. He who hath seen me hath seen the Father, says Jesus. So that aspect is there. So we have to have a strong desire, we have to have this detachment, we have to have this understanding, we have to generate this aspect of sattva, we have to do this friction operation called tapasya, and so all this effort is there. The higher the ideal, of course, the harder is the achievement of it. And there are many pitfalls. Pitfalls are too many. So why is it that people do not strive for it? Because, and there's a wonderful statement in this book I was reading, but we'll put it in Ramakrishna's examples language. And he uses fish as the example. There are some fish who get caught in a fisherman's net, and they just accept it. In fact, they try to deny it. They bury themselves in the mud, thinking that's an escape. And that's another metaphor really for entrenching yourself more in ignorance. A kind of denial that seems to generate some satisfaction, but doesn't really. So this is, obviously the characteristic of this is inertness, darkness, laziness. People are lazy about their spiritual pursuit. And then there are others who struggle and struggle and struggle, the strugglers. And the strugglers really don't get any satisfaction because they're struggling fruitlessly. They're not really struggling for freedom. They're just thrashing about. There are others who genuinely struggle for their freedom. And of those that struggle for their freedom, some manage to jump out and escape. But at least the struggle is there. And of course, we extend this example and say there are other opportunities. Other opportunities are there, but struggle at least. Now struggle need not be negative. It need not be an unpleasant thing. It could be taken with a philosophical attitude as a kind of divine play, a divine sport, part of nature's waves, accepting nature as a series of waves, subtle waves, and these of course we call tanmatras. These tanmatras combine in a certain proportion to create this lower prakriti. The general rule is like this, that one half of one element, subtle element, fundamental element, combines with 1/8 of the others until finally this recombination appears before our senses. and we understand this lower portion of this Prakriti that only the senses can grasp. The higher portions are not available to us. But through practice, we can now progress through all of the strata of this Prakriti until finally we get to the source. Yeah.
Swamiji.
I don't mean tomato sauce either. Okay.
What is the higher nature then of Prakriti?
The higher nature of Prakriti is what you think is the higher nature of Prakriti.
Saguna Raman. Saguna Raman.
The higher nature of Prakriti is Brahman, is this variously described as Brahman, Purusha, Atman, let's call it Purusha. Purusha and Prakriti, because we're trying to reconcile the Samkhya position here, as Sri Krishna more accurately is doing it. So he's using Samkhya language for it. So the higher natures, it'll explain it as we go on, by the way, all right, and answer your question. But right now, the lower nature is still also that same entity. The lower nature is itself Saguna Brahman. And so this Brahman is not only the effective, the efficient, but the material cause. And that is why we don't get caught in a trap. If there's an extra creator God creating this universe from apparently nothing, where is the second-hand shop where he got this material nothingness from? And then who made that, and who made that, and who made that? Infinite regression. And to make this separation, this duality, and I think Swami Vimokshananda explained it very well in his talk on Gospel of Ramakrishna, which I think should be broadcast on YouTube by now. I don't know. But anyhow, he put it like this, you see, to have this creator-creation dynamic, there has to be a capacity to create. There has to be a pre-existing material to create something for. And must be a result. In order to make a pot, a potter has to be there, clay has to be there, the capacity to create it has to be there, and then the formation of the pot has to be there. And then multiple questions arise. One question would be like this: why should the pot be defective if you have a perfect creator creating it? Why should you have a pot with cracks in? Why should not everything be absolutely positive? And so there's an awkward question that arises. But you see, there's nothing like this in the Vedanta, because it says that it's like a spider weaving a web from itself. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. You don't require a Mrs. Spider to make the web. From itself, it creates it. From its own substance. What we see as the world is nothing more than this eternal entity, seemingly fragmented because the mind fragments it. Why do people not take this up? Why do they not find enthusiasm in it? Why do they not find an interest in it? Why do they lapse from it? Why do they not sustain their struggle? Vast majority, why does it not occur to them in the first place? Because, from their point of view, the mind, they accept the mind's position of fragmentation and accept that only that small field as reality, and don't look any further, and don't embrace this technique of this discernment. With a non-discerning mind, what will you accept? You'll accept that the mind's interpretation of what is there is what is true. And that we accept and work within those boundaries. And suffer as a result, no doubt. How to get out of that suffering? Now the wonderful thing, of course, is if the whole thing is one entity, then a natural evolution is taking place. The whole thing is unfolding. The Lord itself, who never ever changes, who never ever has any mobile moving parts, that same entity appears in a fragmented way through the fragmenter of the mind, appears to be a you and a me and a this and a that, and all these names and forms. But the enlightened person will only see this unity. In the same way, when we see the waves in an ocean from a vantage point, let's say from the air, looking down, there's no mistake about it. But looking close up, with only a small limited vision, it's easy to think that the wave is an independent entity, interacting with other independent waves, not noticing that there's a deep ocean underneath it. You see the mistake. So the wonderful thing is that this same dynamic entity itself is unfolding. See how the Bhagavatam says it. Sri Krishna tells us, this is not a cruel joke on yourself. This is my Leela Maya on myself. There's only one entity. No other entity is there. Our mistake, there's a you and a me. There's a friend, there's an enemy. There's an awkward person. There's a kind person. There's a praising person. There's a blaming person. There's a complimenting person that I like. And there's a blaming person that I dislike. And then create some kind of argument for it. See? Some kind of internal battlefield unnecessarily. Using this power of aggression, using the false sense of egoism that says, I will dominate. Or the other reverse, I am the victim, poor me. You can go either way. So it's 9 o'clock now, so we leave this off and pick the study up next Tuesday. This is the conclusion then of this third stanza in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita called Jnanavan Jana Yoga. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace be unto all.